This timeline of the history of scientific method shows an overview of the cultural inventions that have contributed to the development of the scientific method. For a detailed account, see History of the scientific method. BC, c. 2000 BC. Euro first text indices. c. 1600 BC. Euro the Edwin Smith Papyrus, an Egyptian surgical textbook, which applies examination, diagnosis, treatment and prognosis to injuries, paralleling rudimentary empirical methodology. 624-548 Thales raised the study of nature from the realm of the mythical to the level of empirical study. 610-547 Anaximander extends the idea of law to the physical world and uses maps and models. c. 400 BC. Euro in China, Mazi and the School of Names advocate using one's senses to observe the world, and develop the three-prong method for testing the truth or falsehood of statements. c. 400 BC. Euro Democritus advocates inductive reasoning through a process of examining the causes of sensory perceptions and drawing conclusions about the outside world. c. 400 BC. Euro Plato first provides a detailed definitions for idea, matter, form and appearance as abstract concepts. c. 320 BC. Euro first comprehensive documents categorizing and subdividing knowledge, dividing knowledge into different areas by Aristotle: physics, poetry, zoology, logic, rhetoric, politics, and biology. Aristotle's posterior analytics defends the ideal of science as necessary demonstration from axioms known with certainty. Aristotle believes that the world is real and that we can learn the truth by experience. Latin, experimentum, c. 341-270 Apica, a scientific method with multiple variables. c. 300 BC. Euro Euclid's Elements expound geometry as a system of theorems following logically from axioms known with certainty. c. 200 BC. Euro first catalogued library. 1st through 12th centuries, c. 90 c. 168 Claudius Ptolemy, 354-430 St. Augustine reconciles Aristotle's logic and natural philosophy with Christian faith. 1021 Euro Alhazen introduces the experimental method and combines observations, experiments and rational arguments in his Book of Optics. c. 1025 Euro At-the-Rea en al-Barana develops experimental methods for mineralogy and mechanics, and conducts elaborate experiments related to astronomical phenomena. 1027 Euro in the Book of Healing, Avicenna criticizes the Aristotelian method of induction, arguing that it does not lead to the absolute, universal, and certain premises that it purports to provide, and in its place, develops examination and experimentation as a means for scientific inquiry. 13th through 17th centuries, 1220 Euro 1235 Euro Robert Grosseteste, an English scholastic philosopher, theologian and the Bishop of Lincoln, published his Aristotelian commentaries, which laid out the framework for the proper methods of science. 1265 Euro Roger Bacon, an English monk, inspired by the writings of Grosseteste, described a scientific method, which he based on a repeating cycle of observation, hypothesis, experimentation, and the need for independent verification. He recorded the manner in which he conducted his experiments in precise detail so that others could reproduce and independently test his results. 1327 Euro Occam's razor clearly formulated which states that among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. 1403 Euro Yongle Encyclopedia, the first collaborative encyclopedia. 1581 Euro Francisco Sanchez uses classical skeptical arguments to show that science, in the Aristotelian sense of giving necessary reasons or causes for the behavior of nature, cannot be attained. 1581 Euro Tycho Brahe builds large-scale research facility, Strougenburg, dedicated to obtaining high-precision measurements of the planets. 1595 Euro microscope invented in the Netherlands. 1600 Euro first dedicated laboratory, 1608 Euro telescope invented in the Netherlands, 1620 Euro Novum Organum published, 1637 Euro first scientific method, 1638 Galileo's two new sciences published, containing two thought experiments, namely Galileo's Leaning Tower of Pisa experiment and Galileo's ship, which are intended to disprove existing physical theories by showing that they have contradictory consequences. 1650 Society of Experts, 1650 experimental evidence established as the arbiter of truth, 1665 repeatability established, 1665 scholarly journals established, 1675 peer review begun, 1687 hypothesis prediction. 18th and 19th centuries, 1739 David Hume's treatise of human nature argues that the problem of induction is unsolvable. 1753 first description of a controlled experiment using identical populations with only one variable, James Lind's research into scurvy among sailors. 1763 Reverend Thomas Bayes published an essay towards solving a problem in the doctrine of chances, laying the basis for Bayesian inference, a method of inference used to update the probability estimate for a hypothesis as additional evidence is acquired. 1812 the formulation by Hans Christian Arsted of the Latin-German mixed term Gedanken experiment. Although the method had been in use by philosophers since antiquity. 1815 an optimal design for polynomial regression is published by Joseph Diaz-Jurgen. 1877 1878 Charles Sanders Park publishes Illustrations of the Logic of Science, popularizing his trichotomy of abduction, deduction and induction. Park explains randomization as a basis for statistical inference. 1885 C.S. Park with Joseph Jastrow first describes blinded, randomized experiments, which become established in psychology. 1897 Thomas Schroeder Chamberlain proposes the use of multiple hypotheses to assist in the design of experiments. 20th and 21st centuries, 1926 randomized design popularized and analyzed by Ronald Fisher, 1934 falsifiability as a criterion for evaluating new hypotheses is popularized by Karl Popper's The Logic of Scientific Discovery, 1937 controlled placebo trial, 1946 first computer simulation, 1950 double-blind experiment, 1962 meta-study of scientific method, 1964 strong inference proposed by John R. Platt, 2009 Adam, first working prototype of a robot scientist able to perform independent experiments to test hypotheses and interpret findings without human guidance. See also, Artistic Research and Social Science. References